Shia LaBeouf is a gang member, and I never even knew that. As you know, Shia LaBeouf has been making all the headlines this week as of yesterday, which was Fat Tuesday in New Orleans, which is Mardi Gras in New Orleans. And he was on Bourbon Street cutting up, acting like a fool, which most people do during Mardi Gras on Bourbon Street. And he got arrested and he got in some fights. And in this video, we're going to react to what happened with Shia LaBeouf. I'm just finding this out. I saw him make some headlines yesterday as I was scrolling through my news feeds, and I saw that he was in New Orleans, and I already knew that he had a place in New Orleans, or he comes to New Orleans on occasion, so he has certain connections to the city of New Orleans. And I think at some point or another, I found out, if I remember right, he actually was a marshal in one of the parades. So he was the headliner of the parade. He rode in the beginning of the parade on one of the floats or something like that. I know he's rode in multiple Mardi Gras parades in New Orleans. So he has a connection and appreciation for New Orleans. A lot of actors tend to, migrate to New Orleans because New Orleans in Louisiana is an interesting place and people want to be a part of it. And Shia has really embraced the culture of New Orleans. And New Orleans is the type of place they'll embrace you back just as well. And Shia LaBeouf, one thing about him, he seems like he's a very authentic individual. He's got some issues, and we're going to discuss some of them today. But let's get right into Shia LaBeouf. And I'm going to read and react to this article from People magazine. I'm pretty much reacting to this not knowing much about it. But when I went to make this video, I wanted to make sure I pronounced Shia's name right. His last name, LaBeouf. I didn't know if it was LaBeouf. You got to think I'm Cajun, Cajun Asian. Down here in Creole country, Cajun land in New Orleans, the Bayou. And I didn't know if it was LaBeouf, LaBai. You know what I mean? We got all kind of pronunciations down here in Louisiana. So I didn't know how to pronounce the dude's name. So the only reason I have any information on this, and I even found out that Shia LaBeouf was a gang member, is because when I went to find out how to pronounce his name, I wanted to go onto some Hollywood sites and hear them pronounce his last name so I can get it right. And when I did, I couldn't help but click on a few videos. And one of the videos that I clicked on was from Gunner's Collective. He does crime and prison related content like myself. And that's how I just found out that he is a proclaimed Southside gang member. If you know anything about the Southside gang members in California, that's one of the, bigger, most notorious gangs in Southern California is the Southern Mexicans or the Southsiders. And listen, before you get upset, I am not an expert on California gangs. But I know a little bit, and I know that Gunner's Collective, he is from California, and he's been in and out the system, and he knows a little more about it. And from what I understand, Shia LaBeouf did a movie where he played a role of a Southsider, or he was involved with the Southsiders, and he got cool with, I guess, some of the shot callers and, got jumped in. I don't know what the story is. But anyway, he's a proclaimed Southsider. Well, in Louisiana, in New Orleans, they don't too much care about that, honestly. It is what it is. Just like if we went to California, they not going to care that we from uptown or we from the West Bank or wherever we from. Or if you from Baton Rouge, they're just not going to care. But what matters here is where you from in Louisiana. But I want to read this article. We're going to react on it. We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff, man. Shia LaBeouf is an interesting character, and I think it's an interesting thing to talk about. So let's get right into it. Coming from People Entertainment. Headline, Shia LaBeouf dances in New Orleans with jail release paperwork in his mouth hours after arrest. Just the title alone tells me that Shia LaBeouf is all about California prison politics. He must know some of the homies. I know he has to know the homies because he walked out of Orleans Parish Prison with his paperwork in his mouth. Got my paperwork. You know one thing, in California, you got to have your paperwork to show to the homies. So he went to Bourbon Street with the paper in his mouth. And if you know anything about New Orleans, it won't take you long to get from the jail back to Bourbon Street. You can literally probably walk there you can probably walk there in about 25 minutes. That's walking slow. So you can get an Uber there and be back there in less than 5 minutes, be dropped off on Canal Street. You right there by Bourbon Street. So he gets straight out of the parish jail with his paperwork, because he's like, man, I ain't on no bad charges. I'm back on Bourbon Street, and I ain't going to let the day go by because it's the last day of carnival season. Fat Tuesday at midnight in New Orleans and all throughout Louisiana, they shut the streets down because the city has been basically partying for 2 straight weeks. So at some point or another, the city officials and the law enforcement got to say, all right, we got to end this. We got to clean things up. And that's why New Orleans and Louisiana does so well with large crowds is because we're so used to having large crowds in small areas. And so they've got really good at shutting shop down and saying, look, it's over. Clear Bourbon Street, get off Bourbon Street. They come down with them horses and they come down with them sirens and they push everybody off and they clean it up and it's over. Game over. Mardi Gras is done. Well, Shai, he bonded out. He had his paperwork and he knew he had to get back down there to New Orleans, you know what I mean? So he could finish, the last few hours of revelry. All right, this is coming from Elizabeth Rosner from People. The actor returned to Bourbon Street with Mardi Gras beads around his neck, dancing with fellow revelers just hours after his arrest. Shia LaBeouf was spotted among the crowds of Bourbon Street on Tuesday, February 17, hours after his arrest in New Orleans. The actor was charged with 2 counts of simple battery, which is a misdemeanor. Police claim LaBeouf punched 2 men, leading to his arrest. So what I'm surprised of is that he was able to get out of jail that quick. So nowadays, what they have in New Orleans, because so many people get arrested during carnival season, that they have these little transport trucks set up everywhere. So on something like a misdemeanor, they'll usually arrest you, depending on what it is, fingerprint you, book you, send you on your way, give you your paperwork, and you show back up to court. So just hours after his arrest in New Orleans, he was back on the streets. The actor, who's 39, was spotted Tuesday, February 17 on Bourbon Street dancing alongside revelers. In videos circulating online, LaBeouf can be seen wearing Mardi Gras beads around his neck and holding a blue and white jail release paperwork in his mouth as he moved through the crowd, according to local news sources. Earlier that morning, LaBeouf had been arrested following an alleged altercation outside of a Royal Street business. In a statement provided to People, the New Orleans Police Department said officers responded to approximately 12:45 a.m. on February 17 to the 1400 block of Royal Street in response to a simple battery where 2 victims, 2 adult males, reported being assaulted. Investigators say a man identified as 39-year-old Shai LaBeouf was reportedly causing a disturbance and becoming increasingly aggressive at a Royal Street business. A staff member attempted to eject Mr. LaBeouf from the establishment. Once removed from the building, the victim reported being struck by LaBeouf, who used his closed fist on the victim several times, police claim. Man, Shai, one thing, I guess if Shai really is a part of the Southside California gangs, they probably happy, man. He was fighting. And there's video all over online that you can see where he was fighting and he was handling his business. He punched one dude in the face with a closed fist, boom. And he's an actor. He didn't have no bodyguards with him. He was just straight up crashed out. Sounds like he really might be from New Orleans, which I know he's from Southern California. According to the statement, the victims reported that LaBeouf left, but then came back acting even more aggressive. That's what that, you get too much of that drinking, that's what happens. Police added multiple people attempted to hold him down. He was eventually let up in hopes that he would leave. But he reportedly again struck the same victim with closed fists to the victim's upper body. Man, he was doing face shots and body shots. LaBeouf then reportedly assaulted another person, punching him in the nose. Shia LaBeouf, you got to give it to one thing to him. He was standing on business, you know what I mean? Bystanders restrained the actor until officers arrived. Authorities said LaBeouf was again held down until police arrived. The statement continued. So when I went to look this up, there's no shortage of people who are covering this, and the video shows that LaBeouf he did get punched by this one dude. I don't know who the dude was. The dude looked like he might be from New Orleans. I'm sure at some point or another, the dude's going to make himself known. Black dude. He gives LaBeouf a couple shots and holds him down. And then there's some Gothic people that I guess he was in a bar with, which is kind of common when you get further down toward Royal Street. You would have to know what I'm talking about in New Orleans to understand what I'm talking about. But around that area, you start getting into what they call Gothic style type bars where that type of crowd would usually go to congregate together. And so he was around there, and I guess he got into it with them. They'll fight you too. You know what I mean? So it's just different. And man, you got to be careful in New Orleans, in the French Quarter, because you can get got no matter who you are. And what gangs you belong to don't matter unless you from the gangs that are from that area. That's the only way it matters, because they're the ones who, they're the most deepest. They run in the streets. They know how to rip and run that whole area. And if you ain't from that area, well, you just don't be involved in none of that. All right. He was then taken to a hospital for treatment of unknown injuries. All right. So after you see him, he don't look like he's beat up too bad. You can see he got punched in the eye. He got a little scratch, and that's about it. After receiving treatment, he was arrested and charged with 2 counts of simple battery, a misdemeanor. LaBeouf apparently virtually in court Tuesday afternoon in connection with the charges. His next court date is scheduled for March 19th. Despite the arrest, LaBeouf appeared undeterred just hours later, re-emerging in the heart of the French Quarter amid the Mardi Gras celebration. Dude was, after he walked around with his paperwork in his mouth to make the homies happy in California, he was back on Bourbon Street doing the New Orleans stuff. And he's just chilling with the regular people. A couple people spot him and walk up to him and ask him questions. And he's cool, calm, and collective. Listen, I'm gonna tell you one thing. Shia LaBeouf is one of those actors that I like. I like Shia LaBeouf. I don't like a whole lot of Hollywood actors. I don't like the way they act, but he seems like he's his authentic self. The dude just needs some professional help. And he's done some roles, not beside the person he is outside of movies. I like the movies that he does as well. But he seems to be an authentic, original person. He's just being himself. He doesn't try to fit into any mold in Hollywood. And I know they hate that because they don't like that they can't control him. Hollywood loves to control people. And Shia LaBeouf does not seem like the type that wants to be controlled. Ain't nobody who's part of Hollywood elites gonna jump claim California Southsiders and then rip and run in New Orleans with no bodyguards. This dude does things different than the rest of the Hollywood weirdos. He may be foolish and ignorant because he's a multi-millionaire acting the way he acts, but he's obviously being his most authentic self. And that, you got to have respect for that. So I got respect for that. I just wish the dude would get help, honestly. I know he's a genuine dude. He recently played a priest or a monk in a movie which I hadn't seen, and I know it helped convert him, deeper into Christianity, into Catholicism, which, it helped his life better. But one thing about Catholics in New Orleans, they claim they're Catholic, but they also drink heavy and they party heavy. So maybe he needs to be careful if he's going to be, involved in Catholicism in New Orleans and he can't get a control over his habits. He needs to find something else, another place to be. New Orleans ain't the place for him. Louisiana ain't the place for him because Catholics in Louisiana get bent. And so maybe he doesn't need to be here if he can't control his alcohol consumption, if it makes him respond. I mean, he's blessed. He could have got robbed, unalived. They could have kidnapped him. Them dudes in New Orleans don't play, man. The Transformer star, who has spoken publicly in recent years about his sobriety and efforts to rebuild his life, had been in New Orleans since Thursday for the festivities. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, a week of revelries. And if you know anything about Mardi Gras, man, you could get crazy in a week. It's nonstop parties, fist fights. There's fights everywhere, drinking, nudity. But the police are there. You ain't supposed to do none of that. The police, as long as it doesn't get too crazy, I've seen police look the other way on the crimes that are committed. But if it gets crazy, they have to arrest people and they have to stop stuff from getting too crazy. So, and whatever happened, he got involved in, obviously he got too crazy. So he shares a daughter with actress Mia Goth. Funny, Mia Goth, and he's fighting Gothics, with whom he has had an on and off relationship since 2012. Man, I really feel bad for Shia LaBeouf, y'all, man, in a way. He did it to himself, and it's just misdemeanor charges, but he's all over the news, so, and he was out, there was also video with him in his shirt off, and he's screaming in New Orleans, proclaiming Jesus as king, or he's saying something, Jesus is the one, or Jesus is the way. I'm paraphrasing, you have to go look it up. But I think he's struggling with some demons. He's struggling with some demons. He's got to get away from the alcoholism, man. Alcohol and the drugs will send you into a spiral to do the stuff that Shia was doing, man. But I hope Shia can get help because I actually like the dude, you know what I mean? But what say you, man? Did you know that Shia LaBeouf was supposedly jumped into a South California gang, the Southsiders, the Mexicans? I never knew that. I knew he grew up in California. He's from there. But man, that's crazy. But even if he went to jail, let's say that his charges were serious and he went to jail in Louisiana. That's not going to matter anyway. Nobody's really going to care about that. They might think it's cool, a good conversation piece, but it's not going to give him credit inside the Louisiana jails because Louisiana just doesn't run on political prison structure. It doesn't matter here. It's the Wild West. So Shia LaBeouf can go in there and throw his hands up and fight and get cool with dudes, It'll be whatever it is, man. But anyway, thanks for watching the Pen and the Shank. That's just my thoughts on this. Give me a like and subscribe to the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. Let's get it.